Hi, I'm Sam Candy. Welcome to Sustain Talks. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Gail Grace. Gail is a female empowerment coach, helping women to further their careers, have more confidence, greater success, and helps with imposter syndrome, stress management, and so much more. Gail, it's so lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. We've known each other for quite a while, and I was so looking forward to this conversation. I think it comes at a really important time. Now, I gave a brief introduction, but I'd really like you to share more about what you do and why you do it as well.
Okay, great. So I think really what I do now very much comes from what happened to me in my corporate career. So I worked in the construction industry for nearly 15 years. Obviously, that comes with its pros and cons, a very male-dominated industry. I was very young at the time, trying to be successful, trying to represent women in that industry. And the more I got promoted, the harder it became. I suffered from things like imposter syndrome, thinking I wasn't good enough, constantly having to prove myself. Whatever thoughts I had or views I had didn't seem to be the same as the other people around me. And for me, that felt very negative. Um, and I actually started working with a coach to, in my view, help me be better at my job. I thought that's what I was lacking. And actually, through talking with her, I realized it was nothing to do with ability. And in fact, it was all to do with my mindset, the way I viewed myself, my values, my beliefs, all of those kind of core things about ourselves, which I really had no clue about. Um, and yeah, working with her, I realized that quitting my corporate job at that time was the best thing for my happiness and health. But I also realized she had one of the best jobs in the world. It was just every time I finished a conversation with her, I'd say to my now husband, wow, imagine being able to do that for someone. Imagine being able to, support them in that way and change things for them and their outlooks and views. And yeah, so that's what inspired me to move into coaching.
Yeah, amazing. And, having those conversations. And I think people really need it, especially right now. Female empowerment, equality, it's really like they're buzzwords at the moment. But how do you define that?
I think for me, empowerment's one of those words where I really resonate with it because it just gives you that bit of control. I think there's so much in our world that is out of our control. What society's doing, government's doing, the world, whether it's pandemics or equality, whatever it is, there's so much we feel is happening around us or to us. For me, it's finding those things we can control, how we think, what makes us happy, how we look after ourselves, trying to be that kind of best version of ourselves so that when we go out into the world of all the rest of the chaos going on, we feel confident, we feel in control of ourselves, we feel empowered to go after what we want, whether that's career or personal. So yeah, for me, it's just about having that knowledge of yourself, understanding of yourself, and those tools and support to really help you go out and do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah. And what about with equality? There's been a huge change in diversity, equity, inclusion, that equality. Do you think that we're starting to see a difference in countries?
I think I was surprised when I first became a coach. I then had my children, then went back kind of into the construction industry to sort of help and support there. I was surprised how many similar conversations I was having to how I'd felt, 4 or 5 years ago. But there seemed to be the start of some kind of change. And I think now, a good kind of sort of 4 or 5 years on from that, I feel like there is, I just wish that we'd stop trying to kind of get trapped in this mindset of, well, this is the way it's always been. There's so much benefit from having conversations about different ways of doing things and different ways of being. And, there's so much value in that. And I think a lot of the issues come from the fact that we get trapped in this, well, this is the way it's always been. As humans, we don't naturally like change. And it takes a really brave, courageous person to say, no, this needs to be different. And I think fortunately, there's more and more of those conversations happening now.
Yeah, there really is. How do you think that we can empower more women at work? What kind of things can we do?
Well, I think again, it comes from the two levels. So obviously on a kind of corporate organizational level, there's all sorts of things to do with obviously pay, flexible working, especially for mums trying to return to the workplace. I think that's so important. The cost of childcare that makes that so difficult for so many people. We're discounting a huge proportion of the workforce by returning to jobs where they'd be, really valuable and helpful, because it just doesn't make economic sense with the cost of childcare. And I think, there's things that organizations can do, but it takes a willingness to want to do that. It takes a willingness to want to change and to include people and to look at things differently. And then I think on an individual level, it takes the same thing. It takes a willingness to step outside of our comfort zone, to investigate more about ourselves and how we can support ourselves better and empower ourselves better, learning tools and techniques that can help us. And yeah, just keep pushing back, I think is the main thing as an individual.
Yeah. Do you think that there are barriers to that change for women at work?
Yeah, and I think it stems from as I've said, that overall view of, well, this is how it's always been. To so much of our society is male dominated, and it was set up for men to work in these places or to have certain positions or to lead, and women are different. And just trying to say that we want to be treated like men isn't enough. We don't want to be treated like men. We want to be treated like women, but equally to men. And I think there's when I first went into the construction industry, it was all about trying to fit myself into that male model. Don't wear a skirt, don't be over emotional, don't, it was all this kind of like, you've got to fit into that peg, like you've got to fit into that hole. And I don't think that is how it works. I think we need to embrace the fact that there are so many differences in us as a human race, and so many benefits each difference can bring. But yeah, I think it's got to come from that organizational place as well. They've got to want to make it different.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that those conversations about, how women are, and I always got accused of being aggressive when really it was passion. And actually that giving women the opportunity to be passionate but have that acceptance as well. I think it's so important to have that space, and also create that space in meetings. And I often was in meetings, and I mean I'm quite an outspoken person, but actually hearing from those male voices, I know whenever I go to conferences, it's always the men that put up their hands. It's the panels that, we're still seeing like the majority of panels. Even when I'm doing the sustained talks, I find I get approached by a lot of men, but women don't put themselves forward as much. Why do you think that is?
I think it's two things. I think it's women are different. We're naturally more kind of empathetic and caring, and we have that kind of community feel. We want to bring people together. There are differences in just how we are. But I think there's also that point where men will put themselves forward for something, even if they don't think they're fully capable. Whereas women will want the proof that they can do 100% of what's being asked of them. And I think that's, society's driven us to feel that way, because we constantly have to feel that we need to be 100% good at everything, or someone's going to find fault or find a reason to, say we're not as good as someone else. Yeah, there's a thing in psychology called confirmation bias, where your brain will look for things to confirm to you what you already believe. And we're going out into these places already doubting, are we quite as good as someone else? We're going to pick up on everything that confirms that we're not. And that means that we don't necessarily put ourselves forward for things, or put our hand up, or want to make our voice heard, because we're worried about what might come back from that.
Yeah, and then that really holds us back. So actually that is that imposter syndrome, isn't it, that we sometimes talk ourselves out of doing something. And once you have that confidence in you to, I can do this, and you know, that's the thing, that a lot of men, they'll go for a job if they can do 60% of it,
Yeah.
put themselves forward no matter what, and often they'll get it because the woman hasn't put herself forward or been able to express how she can fill the rest of that role, right?
Yeah. And I think we a lot of us have this, you know, need to make sure that everything's fair and everything's just, and we would, you know, we're not always in a place to say, oh well, I'm sure I'll just blag it, I'm sure it'll be okay. You know, we want that inner confidence, like you say, to know, well, actually, if I'm going to put myself in this position, I'm going to be able to do the job afterwards. And sometimes those little doubts, yeah, just hold us back from doing that.
Yeah, the thing is though, that men, they're in those roles, they're in those senior roles, so they have to really be allies to women to help them take that step forward. What more can men do to support their female colleagues and bring them forward?
I think it's a really interesting one. I had some really good male allies in my past. I also had the complete opposite. I had people, you know, asking me if one day I had kids, who was going to cover my work while I was off on a long holiday. You know, things like that, where you just think you have zero understanding of, you know, of this person's, you know, reality or what's going to happen. And I think it all comes down to awareness, information, training, understanding. Again, it's a willingness to want to understand someone else's point of view. And I think there's probably a gap there for some training with, you know, our male allies, to say, these are the areas that you could support us better in. These are the areas that we, you know, would benefit from someone being on our side and not feeling like we're kind of battling against all the time.
Yeah, there's also, and I think still, an issue with the gender pay gap. What kind of things do you think that we can do to change that when maybe applying for jobs or putting ourselves forward? Do you think that there's a way that we can create that change?
Again, I think we have to be careful how much responsibility we take on ourselves to try and fix these things. It's not about us being wrong in some way and needing to prove that we're, you know, worth that same value. I think it's got to come from the other side. It's got to come from people saying, if this is a job role, regardless of who's going to do it, this is what it's worth. And unfortunately, you know, we're not in that place. And when you look at it, you know, so logically, you think, well, why not? If someone's doing the job, surely, you know, they are just worth the same money. I think there's a lot to be done there. And again, from an individual point of view, it's just about having that confidence to put yourself forward, to know your own values, your own worth, what you can contribute to a company. But I think it's dangerous to get too caught up in having to prove ourselves to fix a problem that we haven't created.
Yeah, but it is, you know, I do also think that it's okay to ask, and sometimes,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
especially in interviews and things like that, to ask how that company might measure their pay levels, and what their pay levels are, and what other people in the company's pay is, right?
Yeah, and I think again, it's just that inner confidence, that bravery, that kind of putting yourself in that position of saying, well, what's the worst that can happen from asking? I'm, you know, as valued as another person, and so, you know, I should be able to ask these questions and know what's going on.
Yeah. Do you think there are some real concrete steps that we can take to advance female empowerment?
I think definitely realizing that differences are okay, and actually they're really positive. You know, this kind of idea of stop trying to put a round thing in a square hole, you know, stop trying to make women fit into what have always been male roles, and actually just let women be women in those roles. I think from an individual point of view, the more you can understand yourself, the more you can work on things like your inner beliefs, your values, getting over things like imposter syndrome, especially for women, things like perfectionism, comparing yourself to others, all of these things that as women, we kind of naturally have as traits, or that we, a lot of us do. Any help and support you can get on that to put you in that little bit more confident, that braver position of putting yourself forward, with asking for the money, asking for the pay rise, demanding some answers sometimes, because I think we feel like maybe we're not due them. But actually, just keep making those steps and pushing back on what is being seen as, well, this is the way it is. Why should it be?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot for mentorship, actually, especially with the younger generation, that if people within businesses, if they have female leaders that mentor maybe a younger generation, that they can help them on that journey and give them the confidence. I love seeing mentorship programs.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the key things from that is being able to see what is possible. For me, when I was in the construction industry, I was looking around and I was seeing everyone was very different to me. I was not seeing anyone that I was like, oh yeah, that's someone I could aspire to be. That I just didn't have those in the kind of area I was in. And I think you start to doubt that, maybe they're not there because it's not possible. So yeah, I think that's really key. And also women, to not see each other as competitors in any of this, and to really come together, supporting each other as well. I kept very quiet about my issues right up until, handing in my notice. My boss was surprised. He didn't have a clue what was going on. And the more I chatted to people after it, they were like, well, I feel like that, or I've had a similar experience. But you think in your own little bubble that, it's just you that can't cope, or it's just you that's going through this, it's just you that can't get ahead or can't get promoted. But actually, if we can talk about these things a lot more and come together, in a community to support each other, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and actually I love community groups that, where other females support each other, and part of this amazing group on Facebook, where, to be honest, I think it is pretty much 100% women, but people can put very private situations that are happening in work and get advice from other people, because that peer conversation is important, because sometimes you can't reach out to the people that you're working with because you don't want them to know that it's going on. But actually being able to reach out to strangers that might have experienced something similar and learn from them, I think is so important.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a really key way that coaching works, is the fact that you're having that independent person. They're not working for your company, they're not involved in the day-to-day politics, they're not involved in everything you're going through, but as an independent person on the outside can see more clearly than you can, where you could support yourself better, or how you could help in a situation, or just being able to see from that different viewpoint is really important.
Yeah, I really support coaches. I have a coach, and I've always had mentors as well. And some of the mentors that I've had have been so inspiring and have led me to do what I do today. But who inspires you? I mean, you mentioned that first coach that you had, but is there anyone that you look out and you see inspiration and you get inspiration from?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my very first coach. I think without her, I'm not sure I would have quit my corporate job. I'm not sure I would have trained to be a coach. She really was the kind of turning point to that. But for me, I just love the inspiration of everyone around me, whether it's my kids finding joy in the smallest things, or, friends and family that are going through hard times and being courageous and brave. And, I think it's great to have aspiring role models, but also to just see the wonderful positivity you've got around you, or the wonderful traits of the people you surround yourself with. I love just picking up on those little things and thinking, hey, maybe where can I tap into that today? Where could I be a bit more joyful about something, or where could I be a bit more courageous? Or yeah, so just the people around me.
Yeah, and I honestly, I've loved this conversation. I love to support women. I'm always saying to people, if people reach out on LinkedIn or they send a message, I'll always take 10-15 minutes to give advice to somebody that needs it, to support other women that are going through, to respond to messages that they might put up on LinkedIn or on that group as well. But I think this conversation is so important to give women that confidence. Go and get a coach, go and find a mentor, speak to your peers, join groups, and really, like, it gives me joy to be able to share this conversation with everyone, and I hope that people engage from it. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. It's been great. And yeah, I think, like you said, just the key thing in all of this for me is to just keep talking about this and keep, let's not just keep pushing it under the carpet or it being this big problem that it feels like we can't get over. I think if we can just, keep talking about it, keep doing our little bit, then yeah, hopefully, like all the other big issues that we wish were fixed, we can slowly chip away at getting things how we'd like them to be.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly starting to see some change, and it's great to see it. And it's great to know that there's people out there like you that can support too. So thank you
Thanks.
for your time. I look forward to sharing this, and have a good day.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks.